They were on the top, but I'm going to start at the two dots, and Nun Aleph Amud Beis on the bottom. The two dots on the bottom. We know that the T'nai Ksuva, that the conditions of the Ksuva, is that it says that by a regular woman, I'm going to return her to me as her wife, as my wife, if she's captured. And by a Kohen, the Kohen says I'm going to return her to her family, to her Medina actually, to her people, because at the end of the day he cannot remarry her, because we assume that she was violated. Amar Aryai, Amana leKohen Gadol chayiv livdosa shani korba v'kohenes adrincha lemedina secha. So what happens if an Amana who is married to a Kohen Gadol, which she's not allowed to be married to, what happens if she is captured? So it says that he's chayiv to be pod to her. That means even though he's asked to marry her, she gets a ksuva if she's divorced or widowed, and this is included in the ksuva. So this is included. So even though he wasn't allowed to marry her, Lamaisi needs to be pod to her. Why? Shani korba v'kohenes adrincha lemedina secha. Because he went ahead and he agreed that I will return you to your Medina. And he could still return her to the Medina. He can't return her to himself, because he wasn't allowed to even marry her in the first place, but he can return her to the Medina. And since that was part of the T'nai Ksuva, therefore he needs to go ahead and redeem her and return her to her Medina. However, Mamzeres u'nesina liYisrael eino chayav livdosa she'ena nikor ba ve'osfin cholila into. However, in the case of a mamzeres who's married to Yisrael, who she's not allowed to be married to, Unisina who's married to Yisrael, who she's not allowed to be married to, in that case, if she's captured, then even though she will get a ksuva, if she's divorced or widowed, at the end of the day, he is not chayiv to redeem her because he can't take her back as a wife. And the condition that he made is that I'll take you back as a wife if you're captured. Since he can't take her back as a wife because he was never able to take her as a wife, and he did it legally by marrying her, mamzeres u'nesina, therefore he does not go ahead and he's not chayiv to be pod her. Rava Amar kol she'isr shvir gorim la chayiv lifdosa, isr davar acher gorim la eino chayiv lifdosa. So what's Rava doing? Rava is actually arguing on Aryai, but Rava is saying no. If the Isser Shvuya, if she was mutter to him like a regular woman was married to a Kohen, and then she's captured, and now she can't go back to him afterwards, so that's where the Isser Shvuya, that's where the Shvuya caused her to be also to him, that's where he needs to redeem her. But if there was an Isser that was in place before she was redeemed, before she was captured, like in the case of an Amana l'Kohen Gadol, or a Mamzeres u'nesila l'Yisrael, so then he's Eino Chayiv Livdosa. So what's he coming? So Rava is coming to argue on the case of Amana l'Kohen Gadol. That you said Amana l'Kohen Gadol, since it's Ve'os vinu lach le'insu, or it's Ve'os vinu chal le'medina sacha, therefore you're chayiv to be pod to her. It doesn't matter that that's the t'nai that you bring her back to her Medina. L'maisa, you were asur her beforehand, and if you were asur her beforehand, and the shvuya is not what caused the yisur, then you're actually not chayiv to be pod. And therefore Rava comes and says, no, I agree with you in the case of Mamzer and Nesina, eino chayiv l'vdosa, but even in the case of Amana l'Kohen Gadol, where you said that he needs to be pod to her, in that case, Rava says he will not be chayiv to be pod to her. Leima kitanai. Let's say it's machlokes tanaim.
I learned Zechus Nishmas Gedalia ben Rav Chaim Tzvi.
Sure.
Your site
Okay.
today.
Leima kitanai. So let's say that this machlokes between Rava and Aryai, again, whether it's based on the actual words Ve'os vinu l'chala into Ve'os vinu l'chala medina sacha, or it's based on whether he was asur to her beforehand or not, and that's how we figure out whether he needs to be pod or not. Let's say that this is the same machlokes we have somewhere else. Hamadiras ishtro v'nishbeis. If somebody takes a neder that his wife can no longer get hana from him, and then she is taken and captured. So what's the case over there? If she makes a neder that the wife can no longer get hana from him, so now she's asur to be married to him. So you have a case where the man is now asur to be married to this woman, because Lamaisa, he took a neder that she can't get any hana from him. So this seems to be similar to the case of Amana l'Kohen Gadol, and a Kohen who's married to a regular girl who cannot remarry her after she was captured. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Podeh. Rabbi Eliezer says Podeh v'nosin la ksuvasa. Rabbi Yeshua Omer nosin la ksuvasa v'ino Podeh. So they both agree that she gets her ksuva, but Rabbi Eliezer says that she's Podeh, even though at the end of the day he's going to have to divorce her when he takes her back, because again he took a neder that she's not allowed to get any hana from him. And Rabbi Yeshua says no, you don't have to be pod to him. So we want to understand that this is the same machlokes, and we'll see. The Gemara will spell it out. Amar Rabbi Nassan. Rabbi Nassan says, listen to this question. Sha'alti et sumchus, I es sumchus. Kisha Amar Rabbi Yeshua nosin l'ksuvas ve'ena poda. When Rabbi Yeshua says that this person who took a neder that his wife can no longer get hana from him, when it says that he doesn't have to be pod her if she's then captured, is that kishay diur l'sof nishbet? Is that only when he takes a neder and then she's captured? Or b'shenish be'ru l'vasof adira? Maybe if she's captured and then he takes a neder not to get any hana from her, or that she can get hana from him, so then he doesn't have to go and pod her either. V'amar li, and Sumchos says what? I don't know. Lo shamati. Veneer and devarim. However, it seems to me obvious. Shehedir lo sov nishbet. It's only a case where he took the neder not to get any hanar, that she can't get hanar from him, and then she was captured. In that case, he doesn't need to be pod to her. To iyamar nishbet lo sov hadira asli lirume. Because if you say that in the case where she's captured, and then the guy takes a neder that she can't get any hanar from him, he's not going to have to be poder. So then every single man, when their wife is captured, unless they like her, but every single man, that's always unless a shach. If he happens to like her, so then obviously that's not the norm. So the rove, whatever. Okay, we're on tape. The rove of men like their wives. I'm saying that with a straight face, looking into the camera. Fine.
Good luck, Rabbi.
Okay, I just lost my next pulpit. Okay,
there you go.
What are you going to do? Hopefully they're not going to watch this kosher 2 video, or at least they'll skip. They'll watch the first minute and then they'll skip it over. But if at the end of the day you can say that when a guy takes a neder after she's captured, so now he's going to be putter from being poder. So every single man is going to take a neder after his wife is captured that she can't get any hana from me, and then he's going to be putter from being poder. So it must be that when it's talking about the fact that he needs to be poder, that's only the fact that he's putter from being poder. That's only if he took a neder beforehand, which i.e. again, why would every man not take a neder? Because if he takes a neder, he needs to divorce her. So he took the neder, he basically went through the divorce process beforehand. He didn't actually go through the get, but he said, I'm not going to get another, which means that if for all intents and purposes they have to get divorced, then she was captured, okay, but we already got divorced. It would be no different, quote unquote, than divorcing a woman and then saying, okay, it might be the right thing to do, but you're not married to her anymore. So he took a neder that she can't get any hana from you, so you're not really married now that she's nishbase. But if she was nishbase before you took the neder, then she's all yours. You got to go ahead and be poder. So now the Gemara is going to build this machlokas again to try to mock the machlokas of Aryai and Rava. My love b'mader eshes kohen kamiflagi. Are they not talking about a man who is a kohen who takes a neder that he's not going to get any hana, that his wife's not going to get any hana from him? Rabbi damer krebi lezer, Rabbi damer krebi Yoshua. Look at Rashi. Why does he use a case of a kohen? Bekohen, it's like 2 lines up on the right. Bekohen shehidir es ishto. Di'ibi Yisrael lo amar Rabbi Eliezer podesh arei ein ani kori batnai KESUVOS Yisrael v'svinchu l'chal li'insu. Because if it's by Yisrael, so then he's not going to say podeh because he can take her back as a wife. Etc. Fine. So they try to build this machlokas to be the same exact machlokas between Aryai and Rava. I.e., you have a person who is mader his wife, who's a kohen, and therefore when Rabbi Eliezer says that he needs to be podeh her, that's saying like who? That is saying like Aryai, who says he needs to be poder because he could still he could still return her to her Medina. And according to Rabbi Yeshua, who says you're not poder her, that's because it was an isser davar achar gorima, and he can no longer go back and marry her. Fine. Because what was the isser davar achar gorima? Because he took the neder before she was captured. Fine. Lo, we're saying no, you don't have to, again, and anytime we say no, and I say this all the time, anytime we say no, it doesn't mean that's not necessarily true, but it doesn't have to be true. Again, we're trying to say that these machlokas are the same. We're saying it could be the same maybe, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the same. Why? Because you can explain that the case over here is that she took a neder that she's going to be usher to her husband, and he was mekayim the neder. He either didn't say anything, or he said, okay, amen, good. We'll get divorced. Rabbi Eliezer Savar, who knows etzba ben shineh, Rabbi Yeshua Savar, he none etzba ben shineh. It has nothing to do with this machlokas about returning me to my family, returning me to my Medina, returning me as a wife. She's usher before. No. It has to do with the fact that over here, she's the one who initiated. And therefore, according to Rabbi Yoshua, since she initiated the process, yes, he agreed by not saying anything or by giving a stamp approval. Since she initiated the process, for all intents and purposes, she gave up her right to be redeemed. And therefore, he doesn't have to redeem her in this case. Rabbi Eliezer Savar, who notin etzba ben shineh. Rabbi Eliezer says he's the one who basically, by approving it, he had to approve it, and therefore he still has to be poder her, even though she initiated. Rabbi Yeshua Savar, he non etzba ben shineh, since she initiated it, even though he approved, she basically dug herself her own grave, and therefore he doesn't have to be poder her. The question obviously is, he non etzba ben shineh KESUVOS mayavidita. If you're telling me, Rabbi Yoshua, that he doesn't have to be poder because she's the one who initiated it, so then why does he have to give her a KESUVOS? Lamaisa, she's the one who initiated it. And furthermore, if you're saying that this is a case where she took the neder and he gave the stamp of approval, so what's this whole discussion about whether the neder was before or after she was taken, after she was captured? What's the shaila? If she's the one who took the neder, why should it make a difference, right? The whole reason that we said it's not a shaila is because it's not fair to say that he can do it after she's captured, because every single man's going to do that. But why should make a nafkamina? Why is there even a question if she's the one who's initiating? So if she wants to initiate after she's captured and throw away the ability to be podeh, so then who cares? So clearly it can't be that case if that's the question. The Gemara just spells it out. Besu, Amr b'nasan shalti etzumchus kishamar Rishua nosen lo ksuvas ve'enu podeh kshedir losov nishbeis of losov hadir of Amr lo shamati v'inid denadra ihi mali hadir losov nishbeis mali nishbeis of losov hadira. So now ella la'olam ta'adra ihu. Rather, we're dealing back to what we thought. It's a regular case where he took the shvua. If he took the neder that he's not going to get any hana from her, so then seemingly, like we said, this is the same machlokes as Aryai and Rava. Aryai and Rava is the same machlokes as Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, which is what you want to set it up. Rabbi Eliezer says that he still needs to be pod to her, even though he was asur to her by taking the neder. Holds that what? He holds that... I'm sorry, 1 second. Let me just get this right. Again, when we set up originally, we said Rabbi Eliezer says podeh, v'nosin laksuvah. Yeshua says nosin laksuvasa v'eino podeh. So let's see it out. Aryai mitaretz tamei amana lekohen gadol kuli amalo pligi dechayev lifdosa. So we see over here, we don't have to say that this is the same machlokes. We could say that each one works within their own thing. Again, Aryai is the one who works with that the Tanai Ksuva is, I will return you to me as a wife, I will return you to the Medina. That means anytime he can return it to the Medina, which is always, that means anytime he's dealing with a Kohen or a Kohen Gadol, he needs to be pod to her because Lamaisa, he can return it to the Medina. Anytime you're talking about somebody like a Mamzer or Yisrael, somebody who he can't return to himself, and now is the condition that he'll return her to himself, so then he does not have to be pod to her. And again, Rava is the one who said we don't care about whether he's returning her to the Medina, returning her to himself. All we care about is were they usher to each other beforehand or not. If they were usher to each other beforehand, then he doesn't have to be pod to her. If they weren't usher to each other beforehand and the shvuya causes yisr, then he has to be pod to her. So let's go with an Aryai. Aryai is the one who talks about the Tanai Ksuva being whether it says osvinu lila insu or osvinu lila medina secha. So Aryai mitarets the tamei. So what does Aryai say? Aman la kohen gadol. Again, we're within the machlokes Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua trying to explain it within each one, Aryai and Rava. So Aryai will tell you if an amana is married to a kohen gadol, which he's not allowed to be married, and now she is captured. Everyone agrees he needs to be pod to her. Why? According to Aryai, because the condition was osvinu lila medinasach. I'm going to bring you back to your Medina, and Lamaisa he could bring her back to her Medina. Mamzeres unitzin Yisrael kuli amalo pligi deino chayev livdosa. If a mamzeres or a Nesina is married to Yisrael and she's captured, everybody agrees, Bein Rabbi Eliezer, Bein Rabbi Yoshua, that he's not chayiv to be pod to her. Why? Because he can't be fulfilling Osvinu Lila Insu. I'm going to return you to be my wife, which is all of the, that's the condition of a non-Kohen, because Lamaisi he wasn't allowed to be married to her in the first place. Madir Eshes Kohen, Nami Kuli Amalo Pligi Dechayiv Livdosa Dahainu Amala Kohen Gadol. If a Kohen takes a neder that he's not going to be ahead and he's not going to be he's not going to get any enough from this woman, so too he needs to be pod to her, because again the Tanai is what? I'll return you to the Medina, and he can still return her to the Medina. Ki Pligi, where are they arguing? Bimadir Eshes Yisrael. Again, all within Aryai. They're arguing when it's a regular guy who takes, he's a regular Yisrael, and he takes a neder that his wife can no longer get hana from him. If his wife can no longer get hana from him, so what? So therefore, they can't be married. He can't be osvinu lila Yisrael. He can't be osvinu lila insu. And therefore, as we said, seemingly he should not have to be pod to her. So what's the svara? How are you going to explain Rabbi Eliezer, Aryai? How are you going to explain within your svara that we're dealing with this whole thing? How are you going to explain why Rabbi Eliezer holds that he needs to be pod to her? Rabbi Eliezer, azil basar meikara. Rabbi Yoshua azil basar basar. Rabbi Yoshua we understand, because Lamaisa now he can't take her back as a wife, so we understand why he doesn't have to be pod to her. But Lamaisa, why a regular Yisrael? Why a regular Yisrael who's married to a girl who takes a neder that he's no longer going to get any hana from her, i.e. that they're going to get divorced, and now she's pod, and now she's taken, and now she's captured. Why, according to Rabbi Eliezer, does he need to be pod to her? Lamaisa, I can't fulfill those vinu lila insu. I'm going to return you as my wife, because Rabbi Eliezer says you're right. Now I can't fulfill that because Lamaisa he just took the neder. But we don't care about what it's now. We care about what it was at the beginning of the marriage. When they originally got married, he was a regular guy and a regular Yisrael girl. And when she was captured in the beginning of the marriage, seemingly if she would have been captured, he could have returned her to be his wife, because again, Yisrael is allowed to stay married to a woman. Therefore, we go based on the ikar from the beginning of marriage, and even though now he took a neder that he needs to divorce her, and he no longer fulfills v'osvinu lila insu, since that applied when they got married, and he could have taken her back had she been captured before he took this neder. Therefore, even after the neder is taken, he still is chayev to be pod to her. He's still chayev. But again, it's all working within Aryai, that all we care about is this, the Tanai Tanai of the Ksuva, Ve'ozvinu li le'insu, Ve'ozvinu li lemedinasach. And again, it comes out that anytime there's a Kohen or somebody that's anytime there's a Kohen, so he would have to be poder, because again, the condition that he originally made in the Ksuva is that I'll bring you back to the Medina, because he can never have remarried her. Anytime it's a person who cannot be remarried, like a mamzer who shouldn't have been remarried in the first place, he does not need to have to poder her, because again, he can't fulfill those vinu lila insu. The machlokes is when you have a regular Joe Shmo, a regular Yisrael is married to a woman. So in that case, as a machlokes, the pashup shah would be that he does not need to redeem her, because Lamaisa he can't remarry her. But Rabbi Lezer gives the chiddush and says he still needs to redeem her, because Lamaisa in the beginning of their marriage, before he took the neder, he would have had to redeem her, and therefore he needs to redeem her now as well.
If he's matir his neder, he could marry her. They're still married.
Right, but right now. Again, he's trying to get out of being poder. Once he took the neder, he might as well get the benefits of the neder. Now, within Rava. So now Rava says, Rava mitaritz l'tamei. Again, now forget about Abaye. Forget about any of the Tanai, forget about any of the conditions that is vinuli l'insu visula. Right, he doesn't care about that. All he cares about is if before she was captured they were usher to each other, he's not chayiv to be poder. If the shvuya itself caused her to be usher to him, like in the case of a kohen, then he is going to be chayiv to be poder. So Rava mitaritz l'tamei. Amana l'kohen gadol mamzeres u'nesin l'Yisrael kuyam l'pligi de'eno chayiv l'vdosa. By the amana who is married to a kohen gadol, or mamzer u'nesin was married to Yisrael, which was an usher marriage before she was captured, in that case he's not going to be chayiv to be poder, because again it was an isser davar acher that was goreim the fact that he's not chayiv. Ki pligi b'madir ben eshes kohen u ben eshes Yisrael. So then they're talking about a person who takes a neder. Ben eshes kohen u ben Yisrael. Well, if a person takes a neder, so then what would you think? You would think the same thing. You would think that if there's a neder that he can't marry her, so it's an isser davar acher goreim la, and therefore you would think that what? You would think that he would not be chayiv to be poder. So we have to explain the chiddush that in this case Rabbi Lezer says he has to be poder. Ki pligi b'madir ben eshes kohen ben eshes Yisrael. So the ma'aseh, if it's a davar acher goreim la, it's an outside thing and not the shvuya that causes him not to be able to take her back, because the ma'aseh he has a neder that he's not going to be with her. So then why exactly does he have to be poder? So Rabbi Yeshua says aizel basar basof. So Rabbi Yeshua says he doesn't have to be poder. I understand, because the ma'aseh he's usher to her now. What's Rabbi Eliezer says? Svar is same thing. Aizel basar meikara, because originally before the neder he was mutter to her, and there wasn't an Isser Davar Acher Gorim Law. And when it was a man who was married to Yisrael, or it was a man, even it was a Kohen married to a regular girl, Lamaisa, yes, he can't remarry now, but it was the Shvuya that caused it. So Lamaisa, according to Rabbi Eliezer, since we go Basar Meikara, and before the neder everything was okay, it was an Isser Shvuya Gorim Law, therefore he is Chayav Liftosa. Fine, but again, we see that this machlokas doesn't necessarily have to be the same machlokas, and you can learn Rabbi Lezer versus Rabbi Yeshua even within Abaye and even within Rava, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the same machlokas as Abaye versus Rava. Nish beis chayiv liftosa, the two dots. If a woman is captured, then you're chayiv to be pod her. The husband's chayiv to be pod her. Taner Rabbanan. Nish beis b'chaye bala v'achar kach meis bala. What happens if she's captured while the husband is alive and then the husband dies? So what's the question? Do the Yorshim have to go ahead and be pod to her? So the Gemara says something very interesting. Hikr babala. Well, it depends if the husband knew that she was captured. If the husband knew that she was captured, Yorshim chayav and lifdosa. It's not that she was captured while he was still alive. That's not enough. It's not like I would have thought it's chal. As soon as she's captured, if he's still alive, it's chal on him. If he dies, then the Yorshim have. That's not what the Gemara says. If he knows about it, that means he doesn't have dementia, he doesn't have Alzheimer's, he's not in a coma, he actually knows that she was captured and then he dies before she's freed, then, and only then, is it chal on the Yorshim to go ahead and redeem her. Lo hikr babala, but even if he's alive at the time that she's captured, he's just not in the state of mind to be able to know that she was captured. Ein Yorshim chayav and liftosa. Then the Yorshim don't have to be poder because it's not chal unless again he's alive and he's in the state of mind. Levi samar lemibet ovda ki hamas nisa. So Levi wanted to paskin based on this Mishnah. Amalei Rav hachi amar chavivi or chabibi. Rabbi Chia shehudodo achi aviv. So Chavivi, my loved one, my beloved one, Rabbi Chia said to me as follows: Les hilchsa ki hamasnisa ela ki hadetanya. The halach is not like this Mishnah, rather it's like the Brisa. What does the Brisa say? Nishbeis achar mitas bala inay samachayav and levdosa. That if she's captured after the husband dies, then they're not chayav to be pod to her. V'lo od ela filu nishbeis bechaye bala ve'akach meis bala inay chisom and chayav and levdosa she'enani karbavos vinchu leinsu. Wow. So this is even more Mekel. The other case said that if he's still alive and he knows about it, then the Yorshim need to go ahead and be pod to her. But if he doesn't know about it, then they don't. His is saying no. Even if he's alive, and even if he knows about it, if he dies before she's redeemed, the Yorshim do not have to redeem her. Because again, the Tanai in the Ksuva was, Ve'ozvincha le'insu. I will return you to be my wife. Or seemingly it would be the same case in the case of a Kohen. I will return you to the Medina. But over here, where he is dead, and he can no longer do it, so the Yorshim are not chayiv to redeem her. Interesting. Tana Rabbanan. So we have a case of Mekil and then even more Mekil. It's not that Mekil and Machmir, it's Mekil and even more Mekil. Tana Rabbanan. Nishbeis v'hayu mevakshin mimenu ad asara b'dameh. So if she's captured and they want 10 times her value, so the Gemara seems to be telling us two things here. First of all, you could give a woman, you can be pod a woman even for 10 times her value, and you only have to be pod a woman once. If she captures twice, you don't have to be pod her the second time.
No matter how much they ask.
No matter how much they ask, even if they ask $1. That's what it seems like. You only have to be pod to your wife once, but the time that you're pod to your wife, you have to do it even 10 times what she's worth. But you only got to do it once.
What if the first time they're asking 5 times, and you have another 5 times left?
No, it sounds like only once, no matter what. If it's halacha l'maaseh, come ask a shayla. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer. Your wife will want you to be pod her even if it's more than 10 times, and even if it's more than once. And I hope we would all be pod our wives more than once. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer. What?
The value she does?
No, it's that's the market value.
Or face up or after face up?
It's funny though, because the truth is that her market value would seemingly go down after she's pod at once. So her market value would seemingly go down. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, ein pod nes hashvin yoser al kamei demeim bimnei tikunola. Now he doesn't seem to be arguing that you only pod to her once. He seems to be saying even the time that you're pod to her, the one time that you're pod to her, you don't pay 10 times her value. You only pay her value. And again, this seems to be quoted, I believe, in the whole discussion of pidyon shvuyim in general. There's a whole discussion when somebody you want to exchange for terrorists. So mipnei tikun olam, there's an argument that if you give them too much, then they're just going to do it again. And if you just give them the value, quote unquote, whatever that is, so then you would. So over here you have the machlokas. Again, it seems like they both agree you only have to be pod to her once. Hopefully you'd want to be pod to her more than once, but you only have to be pod to her once. But the question is, when you're pod to her, do you have to be pod to her even 10 times her value, and seemingly even more? Or do you only have to be pod to her for how much she's worth? Ha bichdei demand podim. But either way, we see over here that bichdei demand podim avagav de perkona yoser KESUVOS. It seems like both of them say that even according to Rashbi, who says you only be pod her for what she's worth, it seems like both agree that if what she's worth is more than the ksuva, you still have to be pod to her. Which is very interesting. Why is that a problem? Or meaning, because we have another BAYT that says Nishbeis vayu mevakshim enu ad asara b'ksuvasa. Pram rishona poda mikan ve'elech rotza poda rotza eno poda. That's fine. But Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, again, it's not Rashbi, it's Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel in both cases. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel seems to contradict himself. Im haya perkona keneged ksuvasa podev im lav eno poda. Over here he seems to be saying that you only redeem her for her value if it's up to the value of the ksuva. But if her value is more than the value of the ksuba, then you got a good deal. But you don't have to be pod there for more than that. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel trei kole islay. No, it's not a machlokas, it's not a contradiction. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel has his cake and eats it too. He's giving you 2 kulas. He's saying, first of all, you don't have to be pod there for more than she's worth, and second of all, if she happens to be worth more than the ksuva, you don't have to be pod to her for more than the ksuva. So the maximum, whichever is more of a kula. So if she's worth less than the ksuva, then you only have to be pod to her for how much she's worth, and if she's worth more than the ksuva, then you only have to be pod to her the amount of the ksuva. Weiter? Keep going? I guess we'll keep going. If she gets sick, very interesting. If she gets sick, so you're chayiv to make her better, as her husband. Tana Rabbanan. Almana nizones minichse yisomin. Let's say the husband dies. So an almana is nizones minichse yisomin, that an almana gets to eat from the nichse yisomin. We're going to see in a little while, actually in a few lines, that this is until she gets her ksuva. And again, there's going to be a machlokes whether the almana is the only one who controls whether she gets a ksuva, or even if the yorshim can say, here's your ksuva, get away. That means, according to some people, the almana has a choice, and she can take her ksuva whenever she wants. It's like winning the lottery, a one lump sum payment. But in the meantime, if she doesn't want the ksuva, she could stay and she has to be fed by the yisomin. Or, according to others, no. As soon as the yisomin want to give her the ksuva and get her out, they can give her the ksuva. But either way, the almana nizones minichse yisomim. Until the almana gets the ksuva, again, either by choice, either by her choice or by their choice, she gets to eat from the nichse yisomin until she gets her ksuva. Utzricha refuah harehi kimizonos. And if she's sick and she needs a refuah, then that's like the mizonos, and she gets it from the nichsei yisomim. Again, seemingly until she gets her ksuva. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer, there's a difference between what type of sickness she has. Refuah sheyesh la kitzva nisra pas miksuvasa. If there's a kitzva, then she doesn't get it like mizonos. It's only from the ksuva, and it gets deducted from her ksuva. She'ein la kitzva harei ki mizonos. If it doesn't have a set amount, then it's like mizonos. Well, what's the machlokas here? Well, it seems to be saying that what are mizonos? Mizonos are a constant, ongoing basis, something that you need every day, food. So too, they're equating the refuah that it needs to be like the mizonos. What does that mean? If she has a chronic illness, which she needs constant, ongoing care for, that's like mizonos, that's like food which you need constant for, and that would be paid from the yorshim, again, until she gets her ksuva. However, if it's an illness which is a one-time thing, or it's an illness which we can basically say there's a set price for the healing, that's not like mizonos, that's not constant and ongoing, and therefore she gets paid, but she gets paid from the ksuva, not like the mizonos. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Also, since they used to give blood on a regular basis, they used to let blood on a regular basis to stay healthy in Eretz Yisrael. That's considered to be like an ongoing, chronic, quote-unquote, illness, and therefore that comes out of the mizonos, and not that comes from the yisomin and not from the ksuva. Listen to this story. One of Rabbi Yochanan's krovim, not his kids, as we'll see, one of his relatives, like his cousins, came to him, and they had a widow from their father who needed refuah. She had a chronic illness. Also, the kamei derechon. So what do they need to do? They need to basically pay her from their money until she gets her ksuba. So they came before Rabbi Yochanan and said, is there a way to get this widow out of our lives? That means, basically, they weren't being so nice, but they're saying, is there a way, can you chop away that we wouldn't have to pay her for her chronic illness? Amar lahu, so he said to them, Izlu kotzule midei l'rofe. Go find a doctor, and find a doctor who's willing to take one lump sum to take care of her for the rest of her life. And if you find a doctor who's willing to pay one lump sum to take care of her for the rest of her life, it goes from being a ongoing, yes, it's still a chronic illness for her, but it goes from being an ongoing illness to being a one-time illness, which again would be deducted from her ksuva. You'll get out of having to pay from your money for her. Very smart. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, asinu atzmeinu ka'orchei hadayanim. Are there any lawyers in the crowd over here? So Rabbi Yochanan says, we've made ourselves like lawyers, we've cheated, we've lied, we did something that we shouldn't have necessarily done. Okay, it's not necessarily lawyers, but Orchei Hadayanim, we're going to use it as lawyers for today.
My nephew's a lawyer, too.
Your nephew's a lawyer, fine. Amar, so he's a liar and a crook. So Rabbi Yochanan says, basically, we made ourselves like lawyers, i.e., he regretted the advice that he had given. He realized maybe it wasn't the nicest thing in the world to go ahead and tell them how to get out of paying this woman who was an almana, who was married to their father. Again, there's no fighting here, but an almana who was married to the father. He gave them the advice how to get out of the payments by doing a lump sum. Meikar myself, so myself. So the question is, what happened? Like, did he wake up one day and he just wasn't nice one day and he was feeling guilty the next day, or did he really have a svara both ways? So obviously it's Rabbi Yochanan, he had a svara. So what was his svara? There's a pasuk that says you shouldn't hide from your basar. Who's your basar? Your relatives. He felt that he had a responsibility to his relatives who were asking for a way out to give them a way out. However, the next day he realized it was Adam Chashashani. Well, could have just said the next day he realized it wasn't the nicest thing in the world. The Gemara says, Adam Chashashani, it's not just it wasn't the nicest thing in the world. He realized that people are going to watch, and people are going to see this, and all of a sudden, right, anytime a rabbi says anything, or anytime anybody with power, Adam Chashav says anything, person with power, rabbi, or an Adam Chashav, I want to mix the two up. So anytime somebody says anything, so if it's an Adam Chashav or a rabbi, so what's everybody going to do? Oh, did you hear what he said? And therefore people are going to see Rabbi Yochanan, and everybody's going to start using this svara to get out of it. So he realized that it was a mistake, and therefore he decided to go back on it. So again, he thought he had a responsibility, it's fascinating, he thought he had a responsibility to his cousins to give them good advice, and then he realized maybe there's more of a responsibility to the rest of the world, and everybody's going to do this. Now, I'm not saying that the lump sum wouldn't have been so much money, but again, the mice of the lump sum would have come from her ksuva herself. She would have been paying the lump sum out of her own pocket.
What happens if the doctor dies?
Okay. Can't ask kashas on mices. The Mishnah says if the doctor would die with the lump sum, so then she would begin seemingly go back to be a person with a chronic illness, and it would be mizonos, and they'd have to pay it again. Yeah. Mishnah. My grandfather used to have a doctor that was, I don't know, my grandfather passed away in 93, like 3 years ago, and his doctor must have been like 100, and he's still seeing patients when he speaks to people, so I don't know, maybe some doctors just don't die. Mishnah, lo kasav la banin dichrin. Right, we say ksuvos is shas katan. So you may have heard of this famous idea, we'll say it outside for a second, of banin dichrin, right? The daled and the zayin get mixed up. What's banin dichrin? So we know that a father is going to want to give his daughter a dowry when she gets married. So what's going to happen? Well, I'll spell it out a little bit now. So she's going to give a dowry to the daughter. What happens? He's walking out. He doesn't want to give any dowries. Okay. What happens if he gives it? He has to go to work. Okay.
He's going to prepare the dowry.
He's got to go pay for the dowry. Okay. So we'll tell you what happens. Don't worry. So the Mishnah says there's a case of ban and dichrin. So what's the case of ban and dichrin? The case is where there's going to be a father, and we want him to give a dowry for his daughter. As we'll see, it'll help her get married. It'll help her get an apartment, whatever. But what exactly is the concern? The concern is that she gives a dowry. She marries a man. This man has kids with her. Fine, so everything's fine. So her kids are going to... What happens if the man marries another woman too? So now the man marries another woman, and they have kids as well. Now what happens if both wives die, and then the husband dies? So what's going to happen now? So now you have the dowry that came from this grandfather, which was $1 million, and let's say his daughter had one kid with this man. And now you have the dowry that came from this side, if there was a dowry, which was $5, and either it was $5 or even if it was $1 million, but now his daughter had 10 kids with this man. So now you have 11 kids, and you're going to split the pot of the $2 million, or the $1 million and $5. So not only did this guy bring in $5, now his kids or his grandkids are going to get, the 10 grandkids are going to get a piece of the $1 million that this guy brought into the marriage through his daughter. Understand? His daughter brought into marriage. So if you're a grandfather in general, or you're a father of the bride, you're not going to want to give a dowry, because you're going to be concerned that this man's going to marry 10 different wives. He's going to have... That's one concern. Besides the concern that the man's going to marry 10 different wives, the concern is you're going to give $1 million, and it's not even going to end up in your family. It's going to end up with all the kids, and maybe your kids will get a small piece of it, but all the other kids, and that's not fair, so you're not going to want to do anything. You're going to hold it, you're going to give it to your sons, etc. Why do we care about that? As we'll see in the Gemara, because then people are not going to want to marry your daughter. So in order to get people and prevent people from withholding the dowry because of this concern, so there's an unwritten, we're going to go with a few unwritten rules in the Ksuva, which even if they are written, but if they're not written, then they're chayiv to be upheld anyway. That one of the banin dichrin means that basically your dowry that you give to your daughter, as long as she has sons. Again, if she has daughters, as we see in the Gemara, there's nothing we can do because daughters don't yorish. But you're willing to take the chance that you know that as long as she has sons, whoever those sons are, whether it's 1, whether it's 10, whatever dowry you give goes straight to those sons, doesn't get touched by the other sons. The other sons will split with your grandchildren, they'll split whatever money the husband left, etc. That's fine. That's not your issue. And we'll see that they'll actually split the ksuva as well, which is the Gemara is going to ask why you have to deal with that. But lemaisa, what we're saying is that any money you give $1 million, unless your daughter has no sons, then that $1 million is going to stay within the family, and even if he marries 10 other women, and then they die, and your daughter dies, and he dies, lemaisa, the $1 million that you gave to your daughter will stay within the family and will go to your sons, no matter what, no matter how many other sons happen. And that'll make me feel good, and now I'm willing to give the $5 million to my daughter, let them use it, let my grandchildren use it, and then, unfortunately, when everybody passes away, I know that it'll be passed down to my grandchildren. That makes sense, and that would encourage people to give this dowry. So let's see it inside. Low cost of law. So again, all these are going to be cases where it wasn't written, but as we'll see in a second, chayiv shu tanai bezin. They're all tanai bezin, they're all conditions of bezin, and even if it's not written in the ksuva, we hold by these rules as well. So what's the first rule? Banin dichrin de'ahavu lichi minai. It's as if, whether he wrote it or not, the man says, any sons that you have from me, inun yarsin kesef ksuvasayach yesarachu kon de'imachuon. They will inherit the dowry and your ksuva more than their brothers. Not more than their brothers literally, but they will inherit whatever your ksuva and your dowry is. They will inherit it, your sons will inherit it, and none of the other sons that have from any other woman will inherit it. Chayiv shu tanai bezin. If it's not written, it's still chayiv because it's one of the conditions. Not only that, another condition is banin nukvan di yahavin lichi minai. If we have any daughters together, yahavian yasvin bevesi umizvan minichsa ad lichol negovrin. If you die, if I die, then these women can stay in the house until they get married. Chayiv shu tanai bezin. That's another tanai, whether it's written or not. The third tanai is atahe yasva bevesi misna minise kol yamai migra manusayach bevesi. If I die, says the husband, or writes it, or even if he doesn't write it, you can stay in my house again, like we were saying, until you get your ksuva, and you can be fed the mizonos, similar to what we were saying before. Chayiv, then it's chayiv because shehu tanai bezin. So these three cases are always implied in a ksuva, whether they're written or not. Kachayu anshe Yerushalayim kosvin, anshe gola hayu kosvin tanshe Yerushalayim. In this third one, in the fact, again, this is where we're going to see the argument that some say, because again, as of now, it's only she has to say whether she wants to leave the house or not, but seemingly As we were saying, until now, she can eat in the house until she takes her ksuva. This is what I was referring to before. That in Anshe Yehuda was actually implied until the Yorshin want to give the ksuva. Again, this is where we see the idea that not only does she have the right to decide how long she wants to stay and until when she wants to get the mizonos, and then she'll take her ksuva. If the Yorshin want to just give her the ksuva right away and not feed her, then they're allowed to do that as well. The Gemara says, I already explained this outside, so this will be quick. But why do we have this banidich? So again, we said because we want to encourage the grandfather to give the money to his daughter, and he will only if he knows it'll stay in the family. So that the man will come and give the money to the daughter like he will give to his son. Because again, he won't give the money to the daughter if he knows it'll just get lost and split by 20 different people. Fascinating question in the Gemara. The Gemara says, we know that in general there's a chiyuv for a father when he dies that the sons are going to be yorishim and not the daughters. What are you doing here, says the Gemara? In essence, you're coming up with the gzera dirabanan, which is encouraging people to give money as a dowry, which is encouraging people, for all intents and purposes, to go against the will of the Torah, which is to keep all your money, and when you die, give it over to your sons. Again, it seems like the will of the Torah is that you hold on to all your money, and then your sons get it. Keep that in mind, everybody. Don't spend all your money. Save some money for your children. Hint, hint. Fine. But the will of the Torah seems to be that you hold on to your money, and your sons inherit it. You're giving me a takana now, rabbis, that are making it easier for a man to give over the money to his daughter, because now he'll want to give it over so that she'll go ahead and get married. And in essence, you're going against the will of the Torah, who wants a man to hold on to his money and then give it to his sons as an inheritance. The Gemara answers no. There's another will of the Torah too. Yes, the will of the Torah is for you at the right time to give your money over to your sons, but the will of the Torah is also for you to make sure that your daughter gets married. How do you make sure your daughter gets married? By giving her a dowry. So both of them are the will of the Torah. Yes, the will of the Torah wants you to, if you have money and you die, to give it to the sons, not to spend it all in this world. But at the same token, the will of the Torah is to get your daughter married. So the rabbis are not making any takana against the Torah. They're supporting another will of the Torah. Hanami doraisahu. It's also a will of the Torah to get her married. You take for yourself wives and have children. Ubanos, and have daughters. And take for your sons wives. And make sure that your daughters get taken as wives. I understand when it says that you should take daughters for your sons. It's easy. The man is in charge. He gets a resume. He decides who he wants to go out with. He gets to choose from 100 girls. However, what does it mean? Who says, how do you go ahead and make sure that your daughter gets married? What do you mean? Women have no say. So, Hakamash Malan, what does it mean? Dinil Bisha, what does it mean? The Torah wants you to dress her, Vinichsa, and bedeck her, Vinisevla Mide, and give her money and property, i.e. a dowry, Kihechi de Kafsialava Asu Nisvala, so that men will jump on her. Not literally, the men will jump on her and will want to marry her. And therefore you see that not only you're right, the basis of the question was the will of the Torah is that your sons will be Yoresh. How can you give a suggestion that they should do this dowry and have bun and dichrin and have a takana that it'll stay within the family to encourage the men to give money to their daughters when they get married? Because again, that's also the will of the Torah, to give money to their daughters so that they'll be more attractive to a husband to want to marry them. A few just questions and then we'll conclude. Ve'ad kama. So Gemara wants to know, let's say he can't find a husband for his daughter. How much, until how much should he continue to increase the dowry to try to encourage a guy to marry his daughter? That means, is it unlimited that you have a chiyuv? Because now we're saying not only is it a suggestion, it's a chiyuv seemingly. You got to get your daughter married. So ad kama, until how much do you have to increase the dowry? Abaye v'Rabbi d'amri tavayu ad le'yasser nechse. Just like meiser, and up to 1/10 of your nechasim, you have to be willing to part with in order to give a dowry to get your daughter married. Ve'ema da'av. Now a separate question. These are just separate things. Ve'ema da'av liros deba'al lo liros. Interesting question. We've been saying all along that part of the bun and dichrin is that your grandchildren will inherit the dowry, but they'll also inherit the ksuva. So the Gemara asks, I don't understand. Why is it that the takana is that the grandchildren will inherit the ksuva? Why is the ksuva not split between all 11? Again, the whole reason you're telling me that your grandchildren, only your grandchildren will inherit the dowry is because you won't give a dowry otherwise. But you're not the one giving the ksuva, the husband's giving the ksuva. So why is the ksuva included with the dowry in the thing that your grandchildren will take and not have to split with the other boys, with the other half brothers. Imkain av nami mana v'lo kasav. Because if the father knows that the husband's ksuva is going to be split equally, he's again not going to want to give the dowry. He can say it's not fair. Why should my daughter ksuva get split? So in order to encourage again him to give the dowry, we say not only are your grandchildren going to get the dowry, they're going to get the ksuva of your daughter as well, if and when she should die. So fine. So Gemara says, you know what? If the grandfather gives a dowry, we should say that the ksuva goes to the grandchildren. But let's say the grandfather doesn't give a dowry, so maybe the grandchildren shouldn't get the ksuva. Gemara says lo palo rabbanan. It's a low plug, and even if the grandfather doesn't give a dowry, the grandchildren still get their mother's ksuva and don't have to split it with the other 10 children. Bas bein abanim nami tiros. So now we know that this is all banim dichrin. But let's say your daughter only has a daughter, so we know that she actually doesn't go ahead and collect the dowry. Why? Kenachla shavir rabbanan. So why doesn't she get to collect the dowry? Because it's like a nachla. The Gemara doesn't seem to imply that he's not going to give a dowry. It sounds like a man is willing to take the chance, that he's comfortable enough by knowing that if his daughter has at least one boy, he'll stay within the family. It sounds like that's enough, that they're not going to change, and it sounds like they couldn't even change if they wanted to. Kenachla shavir rabbanan, since the rabbis considered this to be like a nachla, like an inheritance, and we know that women don't inherit. So therefore, it sounds like the rabbis could not have, even though I would have thought that they could have, it sounds like the rabbis could not have made a gzera that the daughter, that if your daughter has only a daughter, that she would be able to inherit the dowry.
They do inherit when there's no sons.
They don't inherit it when there's no sons. It goes to the grand, whatever. It goes to the father's, to the Baal's relatives. It doesn't go to the daughter. So now the Gemara says, okay, do me a favor. At least agree to me in the following case. I understand in a case where there's a daughter and then there's 10 sons that the daughter can't inherit the banin dichrin. But at least, let's say there's one daughter and 10 daughters. At least in that case, let me say that my granddaughter will inherit the banin dichrin. Lo palo grabanan. There's a low plug and women never get to inherit. But tigbi mimetaltale. So now it's a separate question. Let's say it's a son. So if it's a son, so the son gets if there's one son, so he's the one who gets the dowry, but he should be able to get the dowry from italtali. Sounds like the Gemara is assuming he only gets the dowry from land. Kiksuvia shavir rabbanan. No, it's like a ksuva, and therefore the dowry is only collected from land, from karka. Titrof mimishubade. Why doesn't he get to collect it from stuff that was sold, that was mishubad? Yarsunsnan, because it says that he's inheriting it. And again, when you inherit something, you don't inherit from stuff that was sold. Ve'ema afagav deleka mosadina. Now we're going to end with this interesting case. So it seems like the Gemara is going to, I'll just say it outside. The Gemara is going to say that this whole thing that we've been discussing now, that your grandson gets the dowry that you leave, right? Even if your daughter has one son, he gets the full $1 million. And even if there are 10 kids here, they get whatever the dowry is, and whatever the ksuva is, they're fine. The Gemara says there's one exception. If, again, both wives die, that's what we're talking about, both wives die, and now the husband dies. So, if there's going to be no money left over after you give the dowry and ksuva to this one, and after you give the dowry and ksuva to these 10, if there's going to be no money left over, then we have to split everything equally. Now, the chances of that happening are very small. But why would you say that if there's no money left over, everything needs to be split equally? Because, again, this is all a gzera dirabanan. This is all a rabbinic gzera that encourages the grandfather to give a dowry in the beginning. But what's going to happen if you go with this rabbinic gzera and you give all the dowry and ksuva to this one, and you split this guy's dowry and ksuva to these 10, and now there's no money left? Well, there's a mitzvah deoraisa to be yoresh, a person who dies. And if there's nothing left, then by doing this gzera derabanan, you're going to be getting rid of all the guy's money, and now nobody's going to be able to be mekayim the mitzvah doraisa to be yoreshim. So as long as he has $1 left, after the ksuva and the dowry are paid to this one, and the dowry and ksuva are paid to these 10, as long as there's $1 left to split between the 11 of them, then they were mekayim the mitzvah doraisa of Yerusha, they were mekayim the mitzvah derabanan of being able to go ahead and give the dowry passed down to this one, and this dowry passed to these 10. As long as there's $1 left, everything's fine. But if there's not going to be any money left, which is possible, because again, you're assuming that he has all the money in the world. If he doesn't have enough money for both dowries, so then there's not going to be any money left. There's not going to be any money left. Seemingly, we need to split it equally between all of them, because again, otherwise the gzera derabanan over here would come ahead and would be mevatel the deraisa. And that's what the Gemara says here. Ve'ema afagav deleka mosar dinar. Maybe we would say the same, even if there's not $1 left. Maybe we would still say banan dichrin. If by giving the dowry and the ksuva to this one, and the dowry and ksuva to these 10, you're going to end up with no money left, and you're going to be ma'aker the doraisa of giving a yerusha, then we don't go ahead and do it. We'll just end with a story. Rav Papa iasik le libre be'abasura. Rav Papa was busy with himself trying to marry off his son to a girl from the house of Abasura. So he went to the house of Abasura to write a ksuva with his son, to write a ksuva for the daughter. Fine. Shema Yehuda bar Meremar. So Yehuda bar Meremar heard about this, and he wanted to accompany Rav Papa to go do the shidduch with Rav Papa's son at the house of Abasura. Nafak asa ischa zelei. So what happened? So when they got there, so he actually accompanied Rav Papa to the house of Abasura. Kimatu lepischa have a kamafter minei. When they got to the front door, so Yehuda bar Meir says, just got a call, got to go. You stay here by yourself. Okay. Amarle neol mar behadei. So Rav Papa says, come on, you came with me the whole way. Just stay with me. Why don't you come inside with me? Have a cup of coffee. Chazid de lo hava nechalei. So Rav Papa saw that Yehuda didn't want to stay. He wanted to leave. Clearly there was something about, he wanted to schmooze with Rav Papa, but there was clearly something about going inside and being involved with the writing of the ksuva that Yehuda wasn't comfortable about. And we'll end with this. What was he not uncomfortable? So Rav Papa says, I think I know why you're not uncomfortable. I think I know why you're uncomfortable. Why? Amar lei, mai datacha. What are you thinking? You must be thinking, mishum da amar lei Shmuel Rav Yehuda. You must be thinking, you don't want to come in because Shmuel said to Rav Yehuda, Shinana, you sharp one, lo tihave be'avure achsanta. Shmuel said to Rav Yehuda that you should never be present when an inheritance is transferred to someone other than the rightful recipient. And as we'll see, his problem with going to the door was that he was worried that the father of the bride was going to take the rightful inheritance of the son and give it as part of the dowry to the daughter. And he didn't want to be involved in that. Because again, because Shmuel had told Rabbi Yehuda, lo tehavi bavura asanda. You shouldn't be around when this happens. Afilu mi brabisha lebratava. Even if the person is giving the rightful inheritance from a bad son to a good son, to lo yadia mai zara nafik minei, because he doesn't know what kind of kids are going to come out of there. So you should never transfer the inheritance in general. V'kol shekei mibra lebartzon. You should definitely not transfer the inheritance from a son to a daughter. And therefore, says Rav Papa, that's why you don't want to be here, I'm assuming. You want to go away because you don't want to come and see that the father of the bride is going to give a dowry, because you're going to say that's not right. Because Lamaisa, he should be holding on to the dowry. He shouldn't be giving a dowry. He should be holding it so that he can fulfill the mitzvah deraisa of giving it in Yerusha to his son. So what's he going to say? So Rav Papa says to him, don't worry about that. Why not? Because Hanami Takanta Derabanan, because we said on the last DAF, well, he didn't say we said on the last DAF, but it's also Takana Derabanan, Da'amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. As we said before, we know that there's another deraisa which says what? That every man has to get his daughter married. And therefore you're concentrating, just like the Gemara over there concentrated and says, how can he go ahead and give a dowry, lamaisa, there's a chiyuv to give your money to your sons. So he says to him, don't worry, don't not accompany because of that. Lamaisa, there's another pasuk which says what? The pasuk says that you should go ahead and you should get your daughter married. You should go ahead and you should give a dowry to get your daughter married. And therefore what? What do you do? So you'll come with me. He's not doing anything wrong, the father. He'll give a dowry to his daughter. And in a chanami, if he dies and he has money left, so then he'll be able to be mekayim the mitzvah deraisa to give the Yerusha to his sons. Shkayach.